Dear listener, welcome back to Threadwell Cottage, where the needle moves with more than memory. The sampler has begun to speak, and it has much yet to reveal. Let us continue. The next morning unfolded quietly, with that peculiar stillness that only happens when magic has brushed past a place. It was just after 7. The light through the cottage window was soft and grey-blue, diffused by a fine veil of mist. Outside, dew beaded on every stem and petal, and the soft trill of a blackbird echoed through the hedgerows. Olivia had risen early. She hadn't planned to stitch, only to look at the sampler, to take it in, what had appeared the night before. But then she passed her frame, still waiting on its stand beside her chair. She'd felt drawn to it, as though it was waiting for her. She put the kettle on. While it came to life with gentle clicks and hisses, she made a cup of tea and settled into the quiet. Peaches was curled neatly in the chair beside her, while Lulu, half wrapped in a pastel shawl, blinked slowly but remained unmoving. The fire had not yet been lit. The morning was still cool. Now, Olivia sat with the sampler, her fingers working steadily, the familiar sounds of thread passing through linen, the only sound in the room. Her stitches felt smooth, almost guided. She was the one making each one. The pattern was unfolding as if always had. Vines, blossoms, trailing ivy. But now, small details were appearing in the uncharted spaces between. A charm, a pair of tiny golden scissors, the outline of a teacup, each one delicate, each one entirely hers. She hadn't added them consciously, but the needle had followed her thoughts, her memories. When Clara came downstairs, still barefoot, rubbing the sleep from her eyes, she found Olivia precisely where she'd expected her, curled in her chair, stitching already well underway. Clara padded into the kitchen, poured herself a mug of tea from the still warm pot Olivia had made earlier, and joined her for a moment later with the oversized cup nestled between her hands. "You're up early," Clara said, crossing the rug to sit opposite her. Olivia glanced up. "I meant to look, just for a minute." Clara nodded, sipping. "It's easy to lose time with it." They both looked at the sampler. It had changed again. The centre text had remained, the original stitched line, "Threads remember what hands forget." But beneath it now, Olivia had begun working a second line. She didn't remember selecting it or planning it. The chart hadn't called for it, but her hands had moved. Her needle guided her gently through the fabric. The new text was now 3/4 finished, forming in soft grey-blue silks, delicate and even. "Begin where the memories end." Clara set her mug down carefully. "That wasn't in the pattern." "No," Olivia replied quietly, "but it belongs there." They sat in thoughtful silence, watching the words settling into the fabric like they'd always been meant to emerge. Just then, Mo appeared at the doorway, already dressed in a soft grey jumper and slate blue trousers. "Morning," she said, smoothing her hair back with one hand. "I was up earlier than I meant to. Thought I'd leave yous two in peace. stayed in my room and finished a few rows of my borders. She held up a small paper bag. Brought these down with me. Extras from yesterday's village bakery run. They're not hot, but they're still fresh. Clara grinned. Small miracles. I'm not sure what's more unsettling. That sampler, or how quiet you both are. Mo joined them in the drawing room, crouching to pet Lulu, who stretched indulgently under her touch. Then her eyes caught the sampler. Her brow furrowed. Did you add that figure? She asked Olivia. Olivia looked down. In the upper left-hand corner of the design, where she'd just finished a stretch of vine, a small motif had appeared. A woman, stitched in mute slate and lavender grey, her dress caught by an invisible wind, her arms raised gently. In her hand was a needle, held delicately, almost reverently. No, Olivia said softly, at least not intentionally. Mo tilted her head. She looks like she's weaving something or calling something back. Clara looked over as well. I don't think she's looking at us. I think she's looking beyond. They stared at the tiny figure for a while. No one had charted her, and yet Olivia had stitched her. Not because she chose to, but because it felt right. There was a long, thoughtful pause. Clara broke it gently. Do you feel like it's asking to be finished? Yes, Olivia whispered. But you haven't, Mo asked. No, not yet. Clara leaned back in her chair. Maybe it's not meant to be finished in one sitting. Maybe it's just about remembering. They all looked back down, and that's when Olivia noticed something else. Beneath the second stitched line, a third had begun to form. Not stitched yet, but subtly hinting in the pattern. Not ink, not drawn, but visibly in the faintest impressions where the weaves of the linen had shifted. A guide, a path yet to be followed. She stared at it, heart steady. I think this one's meant to reveal itself slowly, she said, her voice almost a whisper, like it knows how much we're ready to see. Outside, the mist was lifting. The first beams of morning sunlight reached the stone of the cottage, casting soft light through the tall windows. Peaches blinked into the glow, then curled tightly in her seat. Somewhere deep in the house, on a perfectly arranged shelf, a carved wooden box shifted slightly, as though nudged by an unseen hand. And the faint scent of dried lavender rose in the air, as though someone had just brushed past, though no one had moved it. The fire had been lit now, and the warmth settled into the drawing room like a sigh of contentment. Clara hadn't left her seat since she'd joined Olivia earlier that morning. While Olivia continued her work on the mysterious sampler, Clara had picked up an older piece from her basket, something familiar and half-finished, comforting in its simplicity. It had been buried at the bottom of her project basket. A seasonal herb sampler she'd started last summer and forgotten. The kind with little mortar and pestle motifs, neatly charted leaves, and soft scripts that read, "From garden to hearth." She'd picked it up without thinking, just to keep her hands busy, while Olivia paused from stitching and let her eyes adjust. But when she unrolled the linen, there was something that hadn't been before. A shape, not stitched, not charted, but unmistakably forming in the lower corner near the base of the design. It was a gate. Not bold, Not dramatic, just present, quietly taking form in the pattern of the weave itself, like the threads that arrange themselves with intention, wrought iron and with a heart-shaped finial at the latch. Clara stared at it for a long moment. Then, without a word, she threaded a needle and began to stitch. Olivia noticed. She set down her tea. That's new. Clara nodded. It's not in the chart, but I know it belongs there. Mo had just returned from tidying up the breakfast things. Came in wiping her hands on a linen cloth. She tilted her head. Let me guess, she said. It showed up before you noticed you'd already begun. Clara gave a half smile. Something like that. The three women sat quietly after that. The only sounds was the popping of the fire and the delicate rhythm of thread passing through fabric. Peaches stretched on her chair with a gentle groan. Lulu had taken to watching Clara stitch, her head tilted just slightly, as if she were following each cross as it formed. What do you think it means? Olivia asked eventually, her voice hushed. Clara didn't answer right away. Her hand moved with a kind of memory, not of something she'd done, but something she'd forgotten. I think, she said finally, it's something I lost a long time ago, or maybe something I chose not to remember. There was a pause. Not a heavy one, just quiet. I think it's showing us what we're ready to carry again, Olivia said. Mo nodded slowly. Not everything, she added, just enough. Clara looked back at the linen. The gate now stood completed in her stitching, delicate, detailed, and open just a crack. A faint suggestion of a path seemed to stretch beyond it, like a whisper still waiting for words. Evening comes slowly to Threadwell Cottage. The golden light of late day spilled across the floors, softening the corners of every room. Through the tall window, the garden was bathed in honey tones. Lavender tips caught the glow, and the ivy on the stone wall shimmered faintly in the breeze. Inside, the stitching had slowed. They had spent most of the day with needle and thread in hand. Cups of tea passed between them. Soft conversation flowed and ebbed like tide water. But by now, the sampler was resting quietly on its stand. A thread still dangling from the needle Olivia had set down an hour earlier. Clara had moved to the armchair by the bookcase, her old herb sampler folded neatly in her lap, her eyes half closed. Peaches had dozed off with her head draped over a cushion. Lulu snored gently beside the fire, one ear flicking occasionally in her dreams. Mo stood, stretched her arms and rolled her shoulders. I'll tidy the sunroom, she said softly, just to clear my head. No one stopped her. The house had taken on the quiet hush of a place that's fully at rest. She walked the familiar hallway, past the library with its soft scatter of forgotten pages, until she reached the sunroom. A long, curved alcove of glass and pale oak, where the last light of the day lingered like something sacred. The room smelt faintly of rosemary and old wood polish. A breeze fluttered the linen curtains. It felt private in the way only certain places do at dusk, quiet, but not empty. Mo wandered to the back shelf. Her fingers brushed the spine of old gardening books and recipe cards until they landed on the carved wooden box. She didn't know why she reached for it. She just did. The walnut wood felt smooth under her palm. There was a small inlaid brass leaf on the lid, dulled with age, but still beautiful. The hinge gave a soft creak as she opened it. Inside, she found a small bundle of threads. Some familiar colours, some sun-faded. Beneath them, tucked carefully and flat, was a piece of linen. Very fine. Unstitched except for a single motif in one corner. A teacup. Outlined in soft dusky pink and dark grey. Mo stared at it. She knew it. Not the way you know something from a chart, not even from stitching it yourself, but from memory. Her mother's hands, a quiet kitchen, the sound of a spoon tapping porcelain, a rainy day, and the warmth of being safe. She sat down slowly on the edge of the sunroom daybed. Lulu, having followed without a sound, leapt up beside her and laid her head gently in Mo's lap. Mo didn't move for a long time. Then, finally, she reached for a needle from a needle book inside the box. She selected one, threaded it with a pale shade of grey, and touched the linen again. Her stitches were small, sure, not planned but steady. Above the cup, a little steam curl began to appear. Then the edge of a saucer, a trailing wisp of flower petals on the rim. She hadn't planned it, but the needle knew. It felt like opening a door to something that had been waiting behind it. Not hidden, just waiting for the right moment to be remembered. From the drawing room, Olivia called gently, "Mo, you all right in there?" Mo smiled just a little. "I'm fine," she replied. Her voice was soft but steady. "I think something found me." Night had fallen softly over Threadwell Cottage. Outside, the fields were a blur of deep blue shadow, and the garden had gone still. The tall windows reflected only the glow from within. Lamplight and warmth pooling gently across every surface. In the drawing room, the sampler rested in its frame, untouched since the late afternoon. Olivia sat near it, her legs tucked under a small blanket. A mug of chamomile tea cooling on the low table beside her, forgotten. She wasn't stitching now, just watching. Watching the linen, because it was changing again. Not dramatically, not like a sudden vision or flicker, just shifting. Quiet as breath, the way light might fall differently on an old painting, revealing something that had always been there. The first two lines of text sat complete and undisturbed. Threads remember what hands forget, begin where the memory ends. But below them, on the lower edge of the sampler's border, something had begun to surface. Not in thread, not yet, but visible all the same. Shapes, 3 of them. The first was a gate, delicate, familiar, traced faintly in the weave of the linen. The second, a teacup with rising steam, small and unmistakable. And the third, not quite formed, just a hint of something winding, like ivy, or ribbon or thread, linked one to the next. Olivia blinked. It was ivy, traced. They weren't charted, but she knew them. Behind her, Mo padded in with bare feet and a shawl wrapped loosely around her shoulders. Her needlework rested in a soft basket over her arm. "I thought you'd be asleep," she said gently, sitting down beside her. "Not yet," Olivia replied. "Look." Mo leaned forward, eyes narrowing, her brow furrowed. "That's my teacup." "And Clara's gate," Olivia said quietly. "They're appearing on the sampler." Mo sat back. "Not stitched." "Not yet, but they're there." A few moments later, Clara entered with a yawn, Peaches and Lulu trailing behind her. She had changed into soft slippers and carried a small tin of mints. She didn't speak at first, only joined them at the sampler and looked. She drew in a quiet breath. "That's the gate I stitched this morning." Mo nodded. "And the cup I found." The three of them stood in silence then, the dogs curled at their feet, the quiet hum of the house pressing gently around them. In the linen, the third shape had started to settle. A faintly twisting strand, a single line, curling outward like a thread unspooling. It connected the gate to the cup and trailed onward towards something still forming. Olivia leaned in, her eyes tracing the shimmer, and then she saw it, a fourth shape, just the beginning. A loop, a curve, perhaps the start of a letter, or the hem of a dress. She looked to Mo and Clara. "I think it's asking to be finished." Clara tilted her head. "By who?" "I don't know," Olivia said. They sat again, each in their usual places, each in silence. The sampler remained between them, and the night felt full of something, not heavy, not frightening, just waiting. And from the hallway, behind the quiet creak of floorboards and the slow cooling of the day, there came the faintest sound of wood shifting, as though something else was stirring. The cottage had gone quiet in that particular way old houses do at night, full of gentle creaks, soft sighs in the beams, and the ticking of one old clock on the mantel. The three women had retired to their rooms after midnight tea, and the dogs, Peaches and Lulu, had settled into their usual nest at the foot of Olivia's bed. But Olivia hadn't gone up yet. She stood alone now in the drawing room, barefoot on the rug, one hand resting lightly on the edge of the sampler frame. The room was lit by a single lamp. Everything else had been left dim. She had tried to sleep, truly, but something had pulled at her, not urgently, not loudly, just persistently, like a thread caught gently around her wrist. And so, here she was, the sampler waiting for her, its linen just catching the low glow of lamplight. The new impressions were still visible. Clara's gate, Mo's cup, and now a gently unspooling thread winding between them. There was no chart for this part, no guide, but Olivia picked up her needle all the same. She selected a thread, soft plum, almost grey in the low light, and began. Her stitches were small, careful. She followed the curve of the thread shape first, letting it guide her hand across the fabric. The motion was soothing, the hush of floss through linen like a whisper. As she stitched, the shape began to take form. A thread, then a curl, then a line, and then something else. A shape that didn't feel like hers. It wasn't frightening, but it was unfamiliar. She paused and looked. There, forming slowly beneath the curling thread, was the outline of a dress hem. Simple, flowing, stitched in the same soft plum, but with a second thread, one she hadn't chosen, beginning to appear beside it in pale gold. A sleeve, an arm, a hand, lifted delicately. Fingers poised not to hold a needle, but to release one. She stared at the tiny figure as it emerged. It wasn't the same as the woman she'd stitched earlier, the one holding the needle like a promise, this one letting go. The threads had crossed her into being, and Olivia had no memory of deciding to place her there. Lulu stirred from the stairwell and padded softly towards her, blinking in the lamplight. She sat down by Olivia's feet without a sound. Olivia kept stitching. The hem of the dress grew longer. A faint border began to form around the figure. Ivy, but different from the earlier vines. This was wilder, tangled. Then, beside the figure's hand, something glimmered. A tiny key, no larger than the head of a pin. It hadn't been stitched yet, but Olivia could see it, waiting to be pulled into being, hinted by the tension in the threads themselves. A key held lightly, or maybe being dropped. Olivia's heart beat a little faster now. Not from fear, but from knowing, without quite knowing why, that this part wasn't about memory anymore. It was about invitation. From behind her, she heard soft footsteps. Clara. She wore her dressing gown and held a cup of something warm. She said nothing, just came to Olivia's side and looked down. Her voice was hushed. That's not mine. Olivia shook her head. No, she said. I don't think it's any of ours. Then who? Olivia let the needle fall still. I think, she whispered, someone else is trying to be remembered. Morning returned with a veil of grey light and a soft hush, as though the cottage itself had drawn a breath, but not yet exhaled. The dogs were the first to stir. Peaches, with a gentle stretch. Lulu, with a sneeze that sent her shawl sliding off the settee. Olivia was already in the kitchen. She hadn't slept much, but she didn't feel tired. A different kind of energy moved in her this morning. Quiet, steady, like the final stitches of a boulder that had taken weeks to reach. She poured tea and buttered slices of bread, looking forward to tasting them. Her thoughts were with the figure on the sampler, the one holding the key. By the time Clara and Mo joined her, the kettle was on again, and the scent of toast had filled the cottage. "You stitched late," Mo said, pouring honey into her mug. Olivia nodded. "I had to." Clara picked up her cup and leaned against the counter. "I kept thinking about that key. It didn't look decorative. It looked familiar." Mo glanced at her. "You think it's real?" "I don't know," Clara hesitated, "but the shape of it reminded me of the old trunk upstairs, the one in the attic under the eaves." Mo raised an eyebrow. "The one with the funny latch?" Clara nodded. "We never could get it open." Olivia blinked. "You think this is pointing us there?" No one spoke. Then slowly, they each set down their mugs. The attic at Threadwell Cottage wasn't gloomy, quite the opposite. It was bright, with a skylight full of slanted beams, and smelled of cedar and old paper. There were trunks and boxes and bundles wrapped in cotton sheeting, all neatly arranged. Mo led the way, the wooden stairs creaking softly underneath her feet. Clara followed, holding back Lulu, who tried very hard to sneak past. At the far end of the attic was a low wooden chest, painted in a faded cream, its latch old brass, and it had, indeed, a keyhole shaped exactly like the one in the sampler. Olivia knelt beside it. No one spoke. She ran her hand over the surface. There was no dust. It had been cleaned at some point years ago, but the lock was still tight. They had tried once, months before, only to find it wouldn't budge and no key seemed to match. "Should we force it?" Mo asked gently. Olivia shook her head. Instead, she reached for the small thread tin she'd brought with her, just in case. Inside, among the usual bobbins and spare needles, was a narrow envelope. She hadn't put it there. It was just there, as if it was slipped between the layers during the night. She opened it slowly. Inside was a slim, antique key. Simple brass, smooth from years of touch, and shaped exactly like the one that she had formed beneath her needle in the sampler. Olivia fit the key into the lock, holding her breath. It turned with a soft, decisive click. The latch shifted. Clara made a soft sound in her throat, somewhere between a laugh and a breath of disbelief. Olivia opened the chest. Inside, neatly folded, was a piece of linen. Very old, tea-stained with age, but fine, and stitched across the top in the same plum and gold threads as her sampler was a single word: remember. Below it, something else. A border, ivy, blossoms, and 3 motifs: a gate, a teacup, a key. Clara knelt beside her. "Is that?" she began. "It's our sampler," Olivia whispered, "but older." Mo stood in the shaft of the morning light. "How is that possible?" Olivia touched the stitches gently. "I don't know." Then, below the border, she noticed something stranger still, an unfinished section, stitched in faint grey, almost faded to nothing. It looked like the beginning of a house. Threadwell. Clara leaned closer. "It's stitched itself." "No," Olivia said softly. "It's waiting." Dear listener, what's remembered in thread often goes deeper than words. Thank you for continuing this quiet journey. When you're ready, more awaits. Until then, let the stitches rest.